Hi there, and welcome to the Daily Gardener, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's February 7th. Today we celebrate the botanist who served as Lieutenant Governor of New York and the very first American female botanist. We learn about the man who changed agriculture forever with his invention. And in today's Unearthed Words, we look at the English author born today. He loved geraniums. We grow that garden library with a book that features Thomas Jefferson's revolutionary garden at Monticello. I'll talk about a garden item that will heat things up, and then we'll wrap things up with a fantastic honor for a modern plant explorer and ethnobotanist, a daughter of the great state of Wisconsin and a senior curator of the Missouri Botanical Garden. But first, let's catch up on a few recent events. Here's today's curated articles. First up was a post that was featured in The Conversation, and the title caught my eye. It said, "Yes, native plants can flourish after brush fire, but there's only so much hardship they can take." Here's what it said. Much Australian flora has evolved to cope with fire, recovering by resprouting or setting seed. However, some plants are sensitive to fire, especially when fires are frequent or intense, and these species need our help to recover. The Morrison government in Australia recently announced a $50 million wildlife and habitat recovery package, and they're going to need it. Now, what I especially liked about this post is that they not only talked about why it's important to encourage the native flora to bounce back, they talked about how it's going to recover. Some plants naturally resprout after fire, and for others, the fire will actually stimulate flowering. And of course, fire can also trigger seed germination. And even seeds that have laid dormant respond to fire. They get triggered by the heat and smoke. There's a lot to unpack in this article, including a brief conversation about whether or not we need to intervene, whether Australia has enough seeds, and how they can better prepare for next time. If you'd like to read this post for yourself, just search for the word fire in the Facebook group for the show, and this post will pop up. Next up was a post from the New York Botanic Garden in their new digital exhibition called Poetic Botany. It's something I absolutely love. I thought this exhibition was excellent, and if you can, you really should take a moment and check it out online. What I loved about this exhibition is that it's interactive and it illuminates the cross-section between art, science, and poetry through 9 different plant species. So what you do is you click on one of the species, and then you're taken to a page that you can explore. It starts out with a slider of images that shows how the plant was captured in botanical art over the years. And beside each piece is what the explorer or the botanist wrote about the plant. But that's not all. Then they share a video, a sampling of some poetry that's been written about the plant, the taxonomy of the plant, and then finally, a little write-up from the New York Botanic Garden, some special notes and insight about each plant. The only downside to this exhibit is that there are only 9 plants featured. I would love to see more. But this, to me, is one of the best online plant exhibits that I've seen. The plants featured include the Indian reed, the common sundew, the lamb of Tartary, the sensitive plant, the Peruvian bark tree, the golden shower tree, the night-blowing cactus, the pheasant's eye, and the American cowslip. So hats off to the New York Botanic Garden for doing such a great job with this exhibit. And I have to say, one of the aspects that I really appreciated that I didn't anticipate would be so powerful was the marriage of the poetry with all of the information about each plant. I read a lot of botanic poetry when I prepare the show, but I have to say, seeing all of the botanical art coupled with all of the scientific information and then having the poetry on the same page was really powerful and so helpful. So this is one online exhibition you really should make a point of seeing when you get a second. You can easily find it in the Facebook group for the show just by typing in the words Poetic Botany, and this post will pop up. Or you can go to the New York Botanic Garden website at NYBG.org and search for Poetic Botany. Well worth your time. So good. All right. Now, if you'd like to check out these curated articles for yourself or any of the articles that I curate and share on the show, you're in luck because it's all in the listener community for the show on Facebook. It's a free Facebook group for listeners of the show. And to join, all you have to do is the next time you're on Facebook, just search for the Daily Gardener Community in the search bar, and then the group will pop up. You can request to join. I'll get a notification on my phone, and then I'll admit you into the group. It's just that simple. And then the next thing that you'll see on your end is that the articles that I curate will start to show up in your Facebook feed, along with all of the pictures of your friends and family. They'll just be interspersed there. And if one catches your eye, you can click on it and read it. Or you can actually go into the Daily Gardener community and share articles that you find or beautiful pictures of your garden. I try to make access to these articles as easy as possible for you so that you don't need to take notes or track down links. You just have to be in the Facebook group for the show. So the next time you're on Facebook, search for Daily Gardener Community and request to join. I'd love to meet you in the group. Here's today's brevities. Today is the birthday of the Scottish-American physician, scientist, botanist, and lieutenant governor of New York, Cadwallader Colden, who was born on this day in 1688. When Colden arrived in America in 1718, he began a family dynasty that would eventually settle in Queens, New York. Aside from his political endeavors and his many interests, Colden was interested in botany and in the new Linnaean system. The family lived on an estate called Coldenham and was often visited by famous New World botanists like John Bartram. Now, Colden and his wife had 10 children, and they actively encouraged each of them to pursue their education. Colden's fifth child was a daughter named Jane. Jane was born in 1724, and she followed in her father's footsteps and is regarded to be the first American woman to have become an official botanist. Peter Collinson suspected as much when he wrote to John Bartram about Jane, saying, "Our friend Colden's daughter has, in a scientifical manner, sent over several sheets of plants, very curiously anatomized after Linnaeus's method, and I believe that she is the first lady that has attempted anything of this nature." A proud dad, Colden wrote to his friend John Grenovius, "I have often thought that botany is an amusement which may be made greater to the ladies, who are often at a loss to fill up their time. Their natural curiosity and the pleasure they take in the beauty and variety of dress seems to fit it for them far more than men. The chief reason that few or none of them have applied themselves to it is because all the books of any value are written in Latin. I have a daughter with an inclination for natural philosophy or history, and I took the pains to explain to her Linnaeus' system and put it in English for her to use, by freeing it from the technical terms, which was easily done by using 2 or 3 words in the place of one. She has now grown very fond of the study. She now understands to some degree Linnaeus' characters. Notwithstanding that, she does not understand Latin, and she has already written a pretty large volume on the description of plants. Cadwallader Colden was able to give his daughter personal instruction on botany. He gave her access to his impressive botanical library. He even shared his personal correspondence with her and allowed her to interact with the many botanists that came to visit the family's estate. In 1754, at Coldenham, when Jane was 30 years old, she met a young William Bartram, who was less than half her age, at just 14 years old. And she also met the Charleston plantsman Alexander Garden, who was just 24. In 1753, on the land around her family's home, Jane discovered Marsh St. John's wort, or Hypernicum virginicum. Alexander sent it to her the following year, and Jane wanted to name it Gardenia in his honor. Unfortunately for Jane, the Gardenia name had been used by John Ellis, who had given the name to the Cape jasmine. Since Ellis had used the name first, Jane could not. So Gardenia is reserved for the strongly scented Cape jasmine, Gardenia jasminoides. They are fabulous cut flowers with their beautiful foliage. They make effective screens, hedges, borders, and ground covers. In 1758, Walter Rutherford wrote to a friend after visiting Coldingham, and he described Cadwallader at his home and his 34-year-old daughter, Jane, this way. We made an excursion to Coldingham, the abode of the venerable philosopher Colden, as gay and facetious in his conversation as he is serious and solid in his writings. From the middle of the woods, this family corresponds with all the learning societies in Europe. His daughter Jenny is a florist and a botanist. She has discovered a great number of plants never before described and has given their properties and virtues in her descriptions. And she draws and colors them with great beauty. And she also makes the best cheese I ever ate in America. As for Jane, she is most famous for her only manuscript, the one that Rutherford just referenced, a work in which she described 341 plants in the flora of New York, and she illustrated all but one of the different species that she described. Today, the genus Coldenia in the borage family is named after Jane's father, Cadwallader Colden. And today is the birthday of the inventor and manufacturer John Deere, who was born on this day in 1804. John was born in Rutland, Vermont. When he was 4 years old, his father returned to England to claim his inheritance. His father disappeared during that trip, and so John was raised by a single mother. As a little boy, John went to school, and at the age of 17, he became an apprentice to a blacksmith. 4 years later, John set up his own shop, and he worked as a blacksmith for over a dozen years. But in 1837, times had changed. There were many blacksmiths in the East, and John was struggling to get business. Ultimately, John was facing bankruptcy when he headed west with just $73 in his pocket. After 3 weeks of traveling, John made it to Grand Detour, Illinois. After settling in, he opened another blacksmith shop in Grand Detour, and seeing that his prospects for business were good, he sent word back to his wife, Demarius Lamb, to bring their 5 children and join him at their new home. During his first year in Illinois, John was constantly making the same repair over and over again to the wood and cast iron plow. The plow had worked well in the eastern part of the United States, where the soil is light and sandy, but heavy and thick Midwestern farmland broke wooden plows. The farmers of the prairie desperately needed something more heavy-duty. So in 1838, when he was just 34 years old, John Deere developed the first steel plow, and the rest, as they say, is history. Fast forward 20 years to 1858, and John Deere was building and selling more than 13,000 plows per year. Almost 30 years later, when John Deere died at the age of 82 in 1886, John's son Charles took over the business. A little over 100 years later, in 1993, the John Deere Lawn and Garden Division alone topped $2 billion in sales. Today, the John Deere Company is worth more than $53 billion. In Unearthed Words, today's Unearthed Words feature selections from Charles Dickens. It's his birthday today. He was born on this day in 1812. Dickens was an English Victorian-era author and social critic, and his personal garden was called Gad's Hill Place. Every day, Charles Dickens cultivated the habit of walking the circuit of his gardens at Gad's Hill Place before sitting down to write his stories. We know from his oldest daughter, Mamie, that Dickens' favorite flower was the Mrs. Pollock geranium, a tricolor variety that dates back to 1858. The Mrs. Pollock geranium was bred by the Scottish gardener and hybridist Peter Grieve. It's considered a classic geranium with sharply lobed leaves that sport 3 colors: brick red, gold, and grass green. You've heard the saying, "Not your grandmother's geranium." Well, Mrs. Pollock could very well have been your second or third great-grandmother's geranium, depending on where she lived. Dickens loved to wear those geraniums in his buttonhole, and he had a steady supply. He grew them in large beds at Gad's Hill, and he also grew them in his conservatory. So Dickens was a gardener. Here are some quotes about gardens and nature from an assortment of Dickens' 15 novels and short stories. This first one's from Great Expectations. Spring is the time of year when it is summer in the sun and winter in the shade. Here's one from The Life and Adventures of Martin Chuzzlewit. On the motionless branches of some trees, autumn berries hung like clusters of coral beads, as in those fabled orchards where the fruits were jewels. And this one's from Bleak House. Around and around the house, the leaves fall thick, but never fast, for they come circling down with a dead lightness that is somber and slow. Here's one from Hard Times. Facts alone are wanted in life. Plant nothing else and root out everything else. And finally, here are some thoughts from The Personal History of David Copperfield. The evening wind made such a disturbance just now among some tall old elm trees at the bottom of the garden that neither my mother nor Miss Betsy could forbear glancing that way, as the elms bent to one another like giants who were whispering secrets, and after a few seconds of such repose, fell into a violent flurry, tossing their wild arms about, as if their late confidences were really too wicked for their peace of mind. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, A Rich Spot of Earth by Peter Hatch. The subtitle to this book is Thomas Jefferson's Revolutionary Garden at Monticello. The author of this book, Peter Hatch, was responsible for the maintenance, interpretation, and restoration of the 2,400-acre landscape of Monticello from 1977 until 2012. Alice Waters wrote the foreword to this book. She said, "I first met Peter Hatch in 2009 when he took me around the gardens of Monticello on a crisp, sunny autumn day. No one knows the land's story better than Peter." Thomas Jefferson's garden, Peter writes, was an Ellis Island of introductions filled with a whole world of hardy economic plants, 330 varieties of 99 species of vegetables and herbs. Alice wrote, "I'm so impressed by this biodiversity, which is exactly what our country so urgently needs right now. A vegetable garden that is, as Peter frames it, the true American garden, practical, expansive, and wrought from a world of edible immigrants." The president of the Thomas Jefferson Foundation wrote this in the preface to Peter's book. Peter is a man of the earth. Annie Leibovitz photographed his hands when she came to Monticello. Peter has plunged those hands into the earth on the mountainside of Monticello each year, coaxing, resting, and willing an ever more copious renaissance of Jefferson's peerless garden. Monticello is Jefferson's autobiography, his lifelong pursuit, the greatest manifestation of his genius, and the only home in the United States listed on the United Nations list of World Heritage Sites. We have Peter to thank for devoting his career to the revelation of Jefferson's passion for plants and the significance of our founder's horticultural pursuit of happiness. Peter Hatch opens the book with this quote from Jefferson. It's from a letter he wrote to the Philadelphia portrait painter Charles Willson Peale. Jefferson said, "I have often thought that if heaven had given me a choice of my position and calling, it should have been on a rich spot of earth, well watered, and near a good market for the productions of the garden. No occupation is so delightful to me as the culture of the earth, and no culture comparable to that of a garden." Such a variety of subjects, someone always coming to perfection, the failure of one thing repaired by the success of another, and instead of one harvest, a continued one through the year. Under a total want of demand, except for our family table, I am still devoted to the garden. But though an old man, I am but a young gardener. Peter goes on to write that Thomas Jefferson's Monticello vegetable garden was truly a revolutionary American garden. Many of the summer vegetables that we take for granted today, tomatoes, okra, eggplant, lima beans, peanuts, and peppers, were slow to appear in North American gardens around 1800. European travelers commented on the failure of Virginia gardeners to take advantage of the fruitful warmth of the climate because of the American reliance on the customary products of Europe, which were cool season vegetables. Jefferson's garden was unique in showcasing a medley of vegetable species native to hot climates, from South and Central America to Africa to the Middle East and the Mediterranean. Few places on Earth combine tropical heat and humidity with temperate winters like those at Monticello. Jefferson capitalized on this by creating a south-facing terrace, a microclimate that exaggerates the summer warmth, tempers the winter cold, and captures an abundant wealth of crop-ripening sunshine. Peter's book is beautiful, it's lavishly illustrated, and the writing is engaging. The first half of the book focuses on Jefferson's gardening, and then the second half focuses on the development and the restoration of the gardens at Monticello. You can get a used copy of A Rich Spot of Earth by Peter Hatch and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for under $7. And here's today's great gift for a gardener. It's the VivoSun Seedling Heat Mat. It's 10 inches by almost 21 inches, and it's $11.99. This is an Amazon Choice and Amazon Prime product. And VivoSun's heat mat offers a fortified connection between the mat and the power cord. It's water resistant, which enables you to scrub it in the sink with no worries. And it also comes with a 1-year warranty. This mat is perfect for standard 10-20 trays and slightly larger than comparable mats on the market. And the mat comes with a reusable storage bag. The mat flattens out when heating and then can be rolled back up for easy storage. And you can get VivoSun's durable, waterproof seedling heat mat and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for just $11.99. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. Today is a big day for Dr. Jan Salek, who's being honored with the 2020 Fairchild Medal for Plant Exploration. Jan accepts her award tonight at a black tie dinner at the National Tropical Botanical Gardens Historical Garden, the Kampong, in Coconut Grove, Florida, the former residence of plant explorer Dr. David Fairchild. Tomorrow, she'll present a public lecture that's entitled Neither Man Nor Nature. Jan is only the second woman to receive the medal. Jan has been an ethnobotanist for over 4 decades. She was a senior curator at the Missouri Botanical Garden. Jan's focus has been to examine the effects of climate change on indigenous people and the plants that they rely on. Jan has worked all over the world. She's been to the most exotic places that you can think of: Indonesia, the Himalayas, the Amazon, and so on. In 2018, the Missouri Botanical Garden tweeted, "Garden ethnobotanist Dr. Jan Salek has built a career on wanderlust." Jan says, "Don't hold back. It's out there. The whole wide world is out there." In 1916, Dr. David Fairchild and his wife Marion, the daughter of Alexander Graham Bell, purchased a property and named it the Kampong. Today, it's one of the oldest buildings in Miami-Dade County, and it's on the register of historic places for the country. The Kampong is one of 5 botanical gardens that make up the National Tropical Botanic Garden, and it is the only one of their gardens located in the continental United States. Given by the National Tropical Botanical Garden, the Fairchild Medal is the highest honor that can be bestowed upon a scientist who explores remote parts of the world to discover important plants and expand our scientific knowledge and practical understanding of them. The award is named in honor of Dr. David Fairchild, one of the greatest and most influential horticulturists and plant collectors in the United States. Fairchild devoted his entire life to searching for useful plants, and he was single-handedly responsible for the introduction of more than 200,000 plants to the United States, including pistachios, mangoes, dates, nectarines, soybeans, and flowering cherries. Anyway, congratulations to Dr. Jan Salek. She's a role model for young women, and her career is an exciting example of the wide open field of plant exploration and botany. The world of the future needs more botanists like Jan Salek. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced weekdays in lovely Maple Grove, Minnesota. You can find complete show notes over at thedailygardener.org, and be sure to share the show with your garden friends. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media: Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest, and of course, Facebook. While you're over at Facebook, don't forget to join the Daily Gardener community. Just search for these 3 words: Daily Gardener Community. The group will pop right up, and then request to join. Finally, I want to thank my team at Podfly Productions, where my fabulous editor is Eric Begay. Have a great weekend in the garden, and we'll see you on Monday.